Is the life you're living now worthwhile? Do you greet your neighbor with a smile? Do you travel in the narrow way leading to the land of perfect day? Is your life worthwhile? Do you sing and sing and smile? Do you lend a helping hand as you journey through this land? Is your life worthwhile? Are you helping others on the way? For them do you think to kneel and pray? Do you follow Christ the risen King? Do you happy praises to Him sing? Are you walking daily by His side? Do you send the gospel far and wide? Do you fully trust the blessed Lord? Are you guided by His holy word? Is your life worthwhile? Do you joy and sing and smile? Do you lend a helping hand as you journey through this land? Is your life worthwhile?
Good morning to you, brethren and friends, and we're happy to be with you. Happy to have the opportunity that we might together open up God's book and see what the will of the Lord is. I'm Leo Plyler, and it's delightful that we can be together, have the opportunity here in the United States of America to freely study the Word of the living God. This past month, Larson, our grandson, was the speaker and teacher. We're delighted to be on with you this month, Lord willing, and to give attention to things that pertain to life and godliness. We'll be happy to have you with us at the Valley View Church this morning as we meet together at 9:30 for Bible study. 10 o'clock the worship service. And each time that we meet together, you're welcome. I want to consider with you at this time the words that we find in the book of Acts chapter 7. Stephen was speaking to the people, and this he says: they made a calf in those days and brought a sacrifice unto the idol and rejoiced in the works of their hands. But God turned and gave them up to serve the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets. We see from this text that God was displeased with that which the Israelites did. We want to give attention to that which they did. They rejoiced in the works of their hands, and God was not pleased with it. But what was the works of their hands? Well, this is made known clearly in the book of Exodus. And this is what Stephen was quoting from, Moses had been called up into the mountain by God to receive the 10 Commandments. Now, the 10 Commandments had already been given, and in the 20th chapter of the book of Acts, they had been made known to the people by Moses. But on this occasion, God had called Moses into the mountain to receive the commandments. Chapter 32 of the book of Exodus tells us, and when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron, and said unto him, Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we know not what is become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden rings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. Well, we'll just brief you on the following portion. Perhaps you recall that they did that. Moses melted those earrings, the jewelry, the gold, and then molded it into a calf, the golden calf. God was not pleased with that. The people were. Now Moses tells the people that this was not acceptable to God. Moses was wroth when he came down from the mountain and realized what it was they had done. They had done this in Moses' absence. They had appealed to Aaron that he make them a god, and he did just that. The people rejoiced in that. They rejoiced in the work of their hands. This text tells us that these people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Well, God wasn't pleased with it by any means. The rejoicing in the work of their hands. I want to consider with you the fact that you and I might do the same thing. We might conceive of, think of something, and have it accomplished, and it not be pleasing to the God of heaven. And then we may rejoice in that. When we do, we are rejoicing in the work of our hands. That's recorded in Acts chapter 7 and verse 41. It is significant what Moses states. It is significant what it is that Stephen states. Stephen records many centuries after this action was taken what they had done. And he's responding to those men who were seeking to destroy him, and they did. They put Stephen to death. If you continue reading in this text, they gnashed on him with their teeth because he told them the truth. And he made mention of the fact that these people made a calf, brought a sacrifice unto the idol. This was not acceptable to God by any means. But then they rejoiced in what they had done. They rejoiced, the text says, in the works of their hands. Are people doing that today? Is it possible for us to do the same? Yes. God is not pleased for us to rejoice in the works of our hands. He's given us instruction what to do, and therefore that excludes coming up with something like this. But when people do invent to themselves teaching, doctrine, practices, and make it a part of the religious activity, God is not pleased with it. When people rejoice, participate in the work of their own hands, God will not accept it. Now this is what Israel had done. And really, my friends, I want you to consider whether or not we're doing that today. Stephen clearly shows that it was the works of their hands, and that God was not pleased because God turned and gave them up to serve the host of heaven. He gave them up. This is what Israel did, and that is what God did. He gave them up. So Stephen shows that God rejected such works. Now the people sought to justify themselves in what they had done, having the calf made, by saying, we don't know what's happened to this man Moses. It's interesting that they speak of Moses as this man Moses. We don't know what's happened to him. We don't know whether something has taken his life, whether he's abandoned us. We just don't know what's happened to this man Moses. Well, nothing had happened to him that was negative. He was doing what God wanted him to do. He was in the mount and receiving the commandments as God was instructing him what they were to do. Well, Christians ought to rejoice. There are things in which we should rejoice, but not in the works of our own hands. The works that are contrary to the will of God, that is. Let me point out some things for which Christians should rejoice. Now we're emphasizing specifically that there is that which we should not rejoice in, the works of our hands. But let me point out that in obeying the gospel, becoming obedient to the faith, we ought to rejoice. In Acts the 8th chapter we read, when the Ethiopian eunuch had obeyed the gospel, he went on his way rejoicing. And then the Apostle Paul tells us that we should rejoice in hope. Also that we should rejoice in the fact that our names are written in the book of life. We should rejoice when we're persecuted for righteousness' sake, Jesus said. Blessed are ye when men shall reproach you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely. Notice now, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for so persecuted they the prophets that were before you. If we're persecuted for doing right, rejoice in that fact. Then we should rejoice with those that rejoice, or that have reason to rejoice. When there are things that happen that bring rejoicing, whether it's to children or adults, we should rejoice with them in things that are basis for rejoicing. Well, again, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 6 tells us that we are not to rejoice in iniquity or unrighteousness, for love rejoiceth not in iniquity, but, notice, but rejoiceth with the truth. Now we ought to rejoice with the truth. Whatever is the truth, when the truth is taught, when the truth is obeyed, when the truth is submitted to, we ought to rejoice in that fact and rejoice with the truth. Whatever the truth is, rejoice with it. So there are many things, this is a few of them, there are many things for which the Christian should rejoice. Now I want to come back to the point of our text. How that, as Stephen pointed out to the council and to the mob, the multitude, that the Israelites, and notice now, he is giving history of that which had happened centuries prior. He said that the Israelites rejoiced in the works of their hands. Their hands. They had authorized, they had told Aaron to make them gods. How ridiculous and foolish. God had already informed the people that they were to have no other gods before them. And yet, Moses, having gone into the mountain and not returning as soon as they either wanted or expected, said, we don't know what's happened to him. Make us gods. How impatient and how perverted their judgment and their ideas, their wishes were. Make us gods to lead us. Today there are those who come up with notions in relation to what they think would be effective for the church activity. And they want to get the church involved in some social, secular, political, or recreational activity. The Israelites made this a matter of entertainment. The fact that they rejoiced in the works of their own hands, they sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Well, brethren, today, look for things and ways to do that they find happiness and joy in these secular, social, and it may be unscriptural or ungodly activity. Let me point out about 10 things regarding this case in the book of Exodus 32. Number 1, Israel said to Aaron, make us gods. Make us gods. Why in the world Aaron yielded to that? He told them, pull your earrings off. He yielded to their request. He should have known better. God had it so instructed them better. Of course, they had come out of Egyptian bondage. The association with the Egyptians perhaps had had influence upon them because they worshipped idols, various gods. But they said to Aaron, make us gods, and he did. Second, they said, Moses has disappointed us. We don't know what has become of him, is the language. That's verse 41 here in the book of Acts chapter 7. It's also recorded in Exodus 32 and verse 1. Let's read it once more. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we know not what is become of him. They were not trusting God. Number 3, Aaron was forward to accommodate their wish. Now today, regardless, if members of the church suggest to the elders or propose to the preacher, why don't we do so and so, and that's not unusual that people come up with ideas and notions foreign to the Bible, strange, like Nadab and Abihu, who offered strange fire which God had not commanded them, and they were punished for. Aaron was ready to fulfill their desires, and he did. Give me your gold, your earrings, Exodus 32 and 2 tells us. So he made the golden calf, and they worshipped it. How foolish. Instead of worshiping the God who had delivered them from Egyptian bondage, they worship a dead, lifeless, incapable God or a calf. Well, next, Israel rejected the works of their God, but they rejoiced in the works of their own hands. That's what Stephen tells us. They rejoiced, and the application was so clear made by Stephen that the people saw it. And surely that has application to all of us today. Well, again, they made this thing a matter of entertainment. Yes, it was entertainment to them. It's amazing how people want entertainment rather than divine instruction. Sometimes people will suggest that they want their children to be able to attend services where there is thus and so, activities that they will enjoy. Well, what in the world is the design of worship? And what in the world is the purpose of the church? Is it to provide entertainment? There are those whose idea is that that's what it is, that the church should entertain us and our children, that it ought to provide fun for us. My friends, that is not the work of the church. And yet, that's what Israel was happy with. They rejoiced in the work of their hands, and they sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Furthermore, they did not ask God about doing this. They proceeded on their own, while they had been informed not to make nor have any gods, Exodus 20 and verse 23. That did not stop them. Again, they were punished for their sin, this sin of worshiping, of rejoicing in the work of their hands. Yes, they were punished for it. Moses was angered. He burned the golden calf. He beat it into powder and strode it on the water. and then made them drink of it. Exodus 32 and verse 20. Note that. They were punished for their sin. The sin of rejoicing in the works of their hands. Well, God told Moses to take the people, and he did. He told the Levites to bind their swords and go out and destroy the people who had brought about this sin. That's Exodus 32 and verse 27. And the text tells us that there were about 3,000 that fell that day. Indeed, they were punished. They were severely punished. And all people today who act apart from the Word of God without authority to produce things that intervene in the work of God or the worship of God will pay the price. In the 15th chapter of the book of Acts, well, let's go back to the 14th chapter. In the 14th chapter of the book of Acts, Paul and Barnabas dissuaded the multitude from such action as engaging in the works of their hands. Paul and Barnabas, having healed the impotent man, were then approached by the Lycaonians, who brought oxen to do sacrifice and garlands. They said, "Sirs, why do ye these things? Don't do a thing like this," and they dissuaded them. Now that's what ought to be done today. Again, King Saul, having been charged to go and utterly destroy the Amalekites, went, did what he did, and then came and met Samuel. He said to Samuel, "Lo, I have fulfilled the commandment of the Lord. I have performed the Lord's commandment." 1 Samuel 15 and 13. Well, Samuel said, "If you've done what God told you to do, why is it that I'm hearing oxen lowing and sheep bleating?" Obviously he hadn't. Well, he sought to lay the blame upon the people. All the people have done this. And that's the way of man. They justify themselves to the extent that they can in the sight of men, but God knows our hearts. Friends, let us not, brethren, let us not become involved in that which is doing the works of man. Is the work of playing upon instruments of music the work of God? Or is it the work of men? Well, you may say, we enjoy it. Yes, the Israelites enjoyed the work of their hands. Think about it, my friends. Consider it. I'm delighted to study with you and look forward to being with you again this coming Lord's Day, the Lord willing. And now, good day.
I've been crucified with Christ my Lord. I am dead to sin through His precious blood. I've been raised to life in the Son of God. By faith I walk with Him. I live for the one who died. I live in Him who was crucified. I live, and yet not I, but Christ who justified, set free to